Myself and Mark Horton is the All Ireland Director at the Rivers Trust, and myself, my name is Constance O'Toole. I'm the Island Development Manager at the Rivers Trust, and we're going to take turns. So, and I think I'm speaking for Mark to say we are very, very impressed that there are so many of you in the middle of the summer. And I also run a very similar network, the iCatch Hub network. And we also meet monthly and we have guest speakers, and we pause in July because a lot of people are away. So I'm super delighted you took the time and you're all here. I'm going to share the slide deck now, and just give me 1 minute. Wait, there it is. Okay. All right, you should see it now, and I'm going to go into presentation mode. Okay. Yeah, I introduced myself and Mark, and we have another colleague, Carol Quish, who's the Ireland Development Coordinator, and Carol is currently on the road and will hopefully be able to join us for the question and answers. But we will be very happy to answer your questions as well. Today, we would like to talk about the Rivers Trust movement on the island of Ireland. And we're going to give, or I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction. So I will talk about the Rivers Trust and our members. We are the umbrella organization and the movement, just for the ones who haven't heard of us just yet. Then we will speak about our peatland restoration program, agricultural catchments program, give you a short summary, and then we will be very happy to answer your questions. So what is the Rivers Trust? So in a nutshell, we are a charity. We are the umbrella body of the Rivers Trust movement in Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Great Britain. We are registered here in Ireland and in the UK as a charity, so that makes us an international charity. We are experts in catchment management and the use of nature-based solutions, which we apply widely. And in short, what we do is we tackle pollution, build climate resilience, build communities' capacity, and help nature's recovery in rivers. As a charity, we have a vision, and it's quite simple, but I think it's a very powerful vision. What we want are wild, healthy, natural rivers valued by all. And I just want to pause there for a moment. When you look at those two boys there, you know, we all have a lot of childhood memories when we were able just to jump into a river or to jump into a lake and not have to think twice, are we going to get sick in it? And this is what we want for our children, for anybody to enjoy nature and be able to dive in. And that brings me to our mission. What we want is to protect, promote, and enhance our freshwater and estuarine ecosystems for both people and wildlife. What do we do? We protect and restore rivers naturally. We prevent pollution. We apply nature-based solutions, which come with a lot of multiple benefits. We build climate resilience in communities and in the environment. We're increasing biodiversity net gains, and we really encourage community engagement and empowerment. So we help to build skills. We make data accessible to the public. We try to help to develop sustainable land management, educate and practice knowledge transfer, and do advocacy and policy. And all of our actions are evidence-based. What you can see there, the beautiful map that was created by Kira, our colleague in data. It's kind of an indication of the flow map. You can see we have plenty of rivers and river channel and streams. And you see why it's so important to look after this wonderful heritage of ours. We have the tagline, our rivers define us, and I think it's very, very true. We are the umbrella organization, and we have members trusts who work on the ground to improve river quality. and we have an all-Ireland approach. And there aren't many environmental charities who do that, but we feel it's the right thing to do because we are in one distinct bioregion. We're the fastest growing environmental movement on the island of Ireland. And we are beyond boundaries. So I will hand you over to Mark now.
Thank you, Constanza, and good evening, everyone. So yeah, Constanza mentioned there that although the Rivers Trust is a charity in its own right, we are an umbrella body for Rivers Trusts, which are independent charities set up by communities, and I'll touch on that now. So we are here to support those groups in their work, and you know, essentially, we would love to see a Rivers Trust in every single river system in Ireland. We're not quite there yet. There is a Rivers Trust now in every single river catchment in Wales, in England, and in Scotland. And there are currently 21 Rivers Trusts and river associations on the island of Ireland. So you might wonder, well, what's the difference between the local Rivers Trusts on the ground and us as the umbrella body? Well, the distinction really is that we're here to support those groups, to support their capacity building, their knowledge and learning. And where we can, we also try to look for funding that we can draw down to disseminate to the Rivers Trusts locally so that they can deliver very locally important projects that together make a national impact. But those independent Rivers Trusts are just that, they are independent. They have their own boards, they're set up as charities in their own right, and they govern themselves, and they all have many projects that they also deliver on their own in their own catchments, because every single river is different and every Rivers Trust is different. So our local Rivers Trusts are all charities in their own right. They look after whole river catchments, or areas of river catchments. And a good example of these two would be, for example, the Boyne Rivers Trust looks after the entire Boyne catchment from source to sea, whereas Inishowen Rivers Trust looks after all of the rivers on the peninsula of Inishowen in Donegal, because they're lots of small rivers, but together they are managed as a hydrological unit. So they're all charities in their own right. Constanza, if you can press, that's great, thank you. We are what's described as a grassroots movement, or a bottom-up movement. That is because our charities are established from a community concern for their local river system. So if you look back at the creation of most Rivers Trusts, there'll probably be some kind of incident or something that has happened in the river system that brought the community together. And identified the need to want to form some kind of organisation that could make a change and make a difference that the community wasn't seeing happening without that targeted action. And this can be around water quality, it might be a pollution incident, it could be because there's a protected species that lives in the river, or it could be some other driver around social and economic drivers. Maybe the river is being underutilised for its kind of recreation potential, and that might be because of water quality and habitat pressures and so on. And because we are grassroots organisations, we're also described as having wet feet. And I often say at this point, that's not just because we're charities and we've got holes in our wellies and we can't afford to replace them, but it is also because we are out there doing the work that's needed to improve our rivers and protect our rivers. And we're not lobbying organisations. So Constanza mentioned earlier on that we engage in policy and advocacy work, but that is not the main focus of the work we do. We use the projects we deliver on the ground and the real tangible work that we're doing to protect and improve rivers to demonstrate to policymakers that things can be done differently, that there are different ways of doing them, and certainly the community has a huge role to play in that. And what we've seen over time is that the projects we deliver have gone on to influence policy. And you'll hear a little bit about that as we go on through some of the projects that we're delivering. We take a whole catchment-based approach to the work that we do. So Rivers Trust don't just look after a little part of a river system, they look after at least a whole river from source to mouth. And as I said, it could also be an area of rivers. Constanze has already mentioned that the work that we do is evidence-based. So we don't just look at the river environment and think it would be nice to do a project here, it would be nice to make that bit of river look a bit nicer. We're using all the available data, science and evidence that's available to us. And we're also collecting that evidence as well through very targeted monitoring programs or using citizen scientists to build up a more detailed picture of what the pressures are in a river system and what needs to be done to correct those. And everything we do is about partnership working. So as Rivers Trusts, we don't own, or we generally don't own, any part of the river system that we're working in. So everything that we do is in partnership with local landowners, with state agencies, and anybody who will work with us to fulfill our mission of wild, healthy rivers valued by all. And very often, the work that we're doing is recognised by the state as being river basin-based activities. And this links in very nicely to the delivery of the EU Water Framework Directive, for example, or indeed when we're delivering projects for species or habitats to the Habitats Directive. And a lot of the water bodies that Rivers Trust will work on are also potentially designated as special areas of conservation, special protection areas. And we're going above and beyond what's done at the statutory level to bring about the changes that are necessary to protect and improve those environments. And so by doing that, by communities taking that ownership and operating at that level and empowering themselves with knowledge and skills in order to deliver the change that's required, this is very much about empowering society to take hold of a situation and take positive action. And so it's about empowering the community and partnership working every step of the way. And of course, as charities, we do need funding to do our work. But we're conscious that funding it's in very short supply. It can be difficult to get. It can be particularly difficult for smaller groups or newer groups to get access to, because they maybe don't have the track history of delivering funded projects, or they simply don't have the capacity to be able to sit down after a whole day's work and start looking at filling in an application form. So where we can, we work together to secure that funding. And we very often are looking for ways to access pots of money that you might not necessarily directly associate with rivers or water quality, but then use that to bolt it together with other bits of money so that we can finance larger scale projects over a much larger area, but in a very cost beneficial way. Okay, so as I said, there isn't yet a Rivers Trust in every river catchment on the island of Ireland, but there is 21 Rivers Trusts and river associations that have established. And as you can see there's quite a spread of them. Some of them are completely in Northern Ireland, some are completely in Ireland, and there are some there that are cross-border. And that brings a unique nuance to the work that those Rivers Trusts deliver, because they're working in two different jurisdictions where policies might be different, funding structures are different, and that brings its advantages and its challenges as well. But as a family of Rivers Trusts, we see ourselves as one on the island of Ireland, and we share knowledge and expertise with our sister trusts across the water in Britain as well. So individually, every single Rivers Trust is making a difference, but when you start to add that together, it's actually quite staggering what these community-led Rivers Trusts are actually delivering. And every year we ask each trust to report back on a number of key things that they've delivered on, and we compile those figures together. And we've actually just published our State of the Rivers report for 2024. There is a link here at the bottom, and we're going to drop that link in the chat. Please don't disappear off down a rabbit hole now looking at the State of the Rivers report. There's plenty of time afterwards to read it, but you'll see in it this kind of composite of all the work that's been done. So for example, almost 500,000 trees planted in 1 year across the Rivers Trusts, 864 wetlands created across various river catchments, and we've managed to ease barriers on rivers and open up 544 kilometres of rivers for fish passage. And that's just some of the projects that have been delivered at scale, at a catchment scale. But also alongside that, it's the number of people that we engage with and the number of people's thinking we influence. So you can see there also, we worked with almost 4,000 farmers in the year, and we worked with almost 34,000 school children across Ireland and the UK. So it really is quite a staggering achievement when you see it all together. So please do, when you get a chance, have a look at the State of the Rivers report that pulls together not just the work that the trusts are doing, but also the condition of our rivers as we see them at the moment in Ireland, Northern Ireland, and in Great Britain. And unfortunately, the story is not as great as we would like it to be. We are all aware of the water quality issues, and you'll hear a little bit about Lough Neagh in particular later on in this presentation. But those rivers trusts, as community-led organisations, are frantically trying to build their knowledge and skills to be able to deliver on these large-scale projects that are required. And one of the things that we as a network of rivers trusts have established is what we call our iCatch hub network. Now, this was actually started by two rivers trusts, by Inishowen Rivers Trust and Maig Rivers Trust. They secured funding through the wheel to set it up. And then when the funding finished and those trusts were moving on, delivering other projects, they asked us as the umbrella body to then keep the iCatch network going. So with funding through the Local Authority Waters Programme, or LAWPRO, as you may have heard it referred to, and also with funding from the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, we've now got this network of rivers trusts and river associations that meet on a monthly basis. We have a 1-hour session where we invite guest speakers, so it's not dissimilar to this network here. Obviously, they're very focused on water quality, catchment management, and river-related issues. But we also have in the past, and want to again now in the future, offer training opportunities for our members as well. And so there are 32 member organisations in the network at the minute. And all of our guest talks are recorded and they're all available on YouTube. So you don't have to be in iCatch to actually go back and watch those recordings. So again, we can share the link there, and there's quite a variety of talks there, from invasive species to barrier easement and removal in rivers, and citizen science, and so on and so forth, much of which I'm sure will be of great interest to all of you. And talking about citizen science, we have our own citizen science campaign. It's called the Big River Watch. We've run it now twice, and it's been hugely successful. We're glad to say that in Ireland, our second outing of it, which was earlier this year, we attracted many, many more contributors here on the island of Ireland. It's a mobile phone app which you can download. You go to a location of your choice on your local river, and you simply sit for 15 minutes and use the app to record what you see, what you hear, what you think the condition of the water is. Is there any strange smells around the water? Does it look a funny colour? And all of this information is incredibly useful, because the places that people go and record this information is not necessarily places that would otherwise be monitored by anyone. So it gives us a very interesting census or snapshot of what the water environment's like on a given day. So we are having the Big River Watch again from the 6th to the 12th of September. If you want to download the app and have a go yourself, there is an Apple version and an Android version available, and it's free, completely free. It gets updated between campaigns, so that the app will change, but it gets updated on your phone, and it provides you with some very simple to use guides as well. So if you see a bird on the river, you're not sure what it is, there's a list of birds that you may actually be looking at on the river, and you can explore what it is you're actually looking at. You'll note when you open the app that you'll see beavers on it as well. if you see a beaver in Ireland, then we should all be worried because there's never been beavers in Ireland and we do not want them here. But you've probably heard that in Britain, they've started to reintroduce beavers to the environment. And they're there because this is the big River Watch app for all of Ireland and the UK. So there's some things we wouldn't expect you to see, and we hope you wouldn't see them. But please do take part if you can. And we use this data to give that information back to the public and also to inform the projects that we're delivering. And we, I suppose, in fancy words, talk about this as democratizing data, because one of the things that we experience as Rivers Trust time and time again is that organizations hold huge data sets that could be really, really useful and powerful in terms of planning really effective river projects, and they don't want to share them. So people become really possessive about the data that they capture, and we're turning that on its head. So any information we can get a hold of that we can then make public, we do within the realms of what's possible. But the data that we collect through our citizen science programs becomes immediately publicly available. And there's two things here you can see on the slide. One is Outfall Safari. And the Outfall Safari is an app that anybody could download and go and do an assessment of all the drains that flow into the local rivers. So it's a bit like the Big River Watch, but it's specifically falls into the river environment. And the second kind of maps you can see there with brown dots on them, we affectionately call this the poo map. And the poo map is where combined sewer overflows are discharging raw sewage into our water systems. Now, in Britain, we have something that's called event duration monitoring. So where there's a combined sewer overflow, they monitor how often it overflows sewage, and they record how long it does it as well. We don't yet have that technology installed on our rivers in Ireland or Northern Ireland. It is starting to be applied, but not to the scale that it's already in place in Britain. So on this particular data set, which you can get access to on our website, we show the locations of all of the combined sewer overflows. So we can't yet tell you how bad they are. We know they are bad, but we can show you where they are. So if you're thinking about getting into a river to canoe, to swim, whatever, you can go on the map and you can look, is there something nearby that I should know about before I get into this river? So it's a really useful tip for doing that. So I'm going to hand back to Constanza, and she's going to talk to you about our peatlands program, and then I'll come back to you and talk to you about our agricultural catchments program.
Thank you, Mark. So you might be wondering, as a Rivers Trust, why do you have a peatland program? And I will talk about that now when I can move the slides. There it is. So I might just skip to the next slide. This gives you a bit of the background why we are interested in peatlands. So we are looking after rivers and their connected ecosystems, and wetlands and peatlands are connected to rivers and streams, as you know. So they are, it's important, and we work in one hydrological unit within the catchments, and they're part of it, and they're really important. We're also very aware of the climate crisis we're in. And also biodiversity and water crisis. So this is something we want to do about. You can see there on the left, that's a map of the peatlands in Ireland. I couldn't get a map of Northern Ireland combined, but you can see, of course, there's peatlands in Northern Ireland as well. And Ireland has one of the largest areas of peat coverage, and it's about 21% of its total land area. And I recently heard it's probably even more than that. That's an estimate. And they are of significant global value. The problem we have is that 82% are degraded to some extent. And what happens when a peatland is degraded? It negatively impacts water quality and releases nitrous oxides and carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, and these are all greenhouse gases, and we know that's a contributor to the climate change we're experiencing. And they also release then sediments and nutrients into the watercourse, and this is really bad, especially for fish and all the little creatures that live in the rivers. What we want is to turn these into healthy peatlands because they can provide blue services, for example, pre-filtration of drinking water, they mitigate floods and increase biodiversities. These are very, very important habitats. I'm just going back to this slide here. So we have projects ongoing. And initially, we showed to you that we are looking for funding for our trusts. And of course, we are delivering projects as well as the umbrella organization. And with these EU funding streams, we try to get into the country is, first of all, we're getting money into the country and to put it to good use to improve the environment. Then we try to do pilots and work in catchments where our member trusts are operational. At the moment, we have 2 live projects in relation to peatland, and one is an Interreg North-West Europe project called Buffer Plus, and the other one is an Interreg Europe project called REWET, that stands for River and Wetlands. I will talk about them a bit more, but we also have project websites. If you're interested to find out more, you can have a look at that. And the learnings from these 2 projects will feed into other projects we will be part of. Some of these are under the application stage. One is a Horizon Europe project, and the other one is another Interreg North-West Europe project. So Interreg's projects are very much into this interregional learning. So we are also going abroad, looking at solutions from other countries, and we're also bringing all of this knowledge back, and we bring our stakeholders to these meetings to maximize the knowledge we're gaining from there. So the Interreg North-West Europe Buffer Plus project is called Buffer Plus because we're talking about the double buffer. So we have the water and carbon buffer in peatlands. When you look at the left infographic, you can see the water there. So there's a high water table there, and this shows that peatlands have buffering capacity to store water in times of heavy rainfall. And I'm sure you've heard that climate change is changing our weather in a way that we have times where we experience extremely heavy rainfall, and that alternates often during the summer where we have gone in previous years even into drought condition, which seems very strange. So why do you have heavy rain and droughts? But there's problems. It's when heavy rain falls after a drought, the soil has no capacity to take that in, to soak it up, because it has been so dry, and this water just floods, runs off the sediments, and can cause floods as well. So on the right side, but peatlands have the ability to rain water and prevent droughts. So if we have them as a buffer, then they can act that. So for both of these scenarios, too much rain, too little rain, peatlands can naturally regulate those. What's the carbon buffer? So when a peatland is drained, it's acting as a carbon sink. That means we have more carbon dioxide release, that's a greenhouse gas, into the atmosphere than they can absorb. They have this great capacity to absorb carbon dioxide through the sphagnum mosses. And when they're sealed, when the water is sealed, when it's healthy and it is wet and moist, then there's no oxidation and the gases don't escape. On the in contrary, they actually act as carbon sinks. So, and this is what Buffer Plus project works with. And we have 2 pilot sites, and there's another Irish partner, which is the South Kerry Development Partnership. We have a pilot site we're working on in Inishowen, or in County Donegal, and we have an Inishowen Rivers Trust. And also we have a River Moy Trust and a pilot in County Mayo. The National Parks and Wildlife Service is co-financing this project. The Interregs come with hefty match funding requirements, which can be really tough for organizations like ourselves or charities. So it's sometimes 20, 30, or 40% you have to match fund. And we're very grateful whenever we get a governmental organization to step in, but it's hard for NGOs to carry out this work, but we as an umbrella organization can, and this is how we support our movement as well. The second, I call it our sister project, just started. Buffer Plus is in year 1. Moving from year 1 into year 2, and the River Wetland Interreg Europe project is in its first year. This is quite different, and this is a very unusual Interreg. So we don't do work on the ground, but we're working at a policy. So we're trying to improve governance, and we work for this one with the Department of the Environment, Climate Action and Communication, DEC. We try to improve a tiny bit of the peatland policy. And this kind of project is a means of public intervention to help to improve a policy instrument, as they call it. So, and what we look at is that we want to help DEC to improve the climate action plan, and the big arrow points at that bit we want to improve, and that's changing our land use. They're currently restoring a lot of state-owned peatland, but they also have this great potential to do that on privately owned land. I showed earlier the peatland map, and over 90% is privately owned. So, and we're looking at to work in partnerships, and this is what we are really good at the Rivers Trust. We work with landowners, and what we would like to do is encourage them to restore peatlands so that they can act as this great buffer and help us now that we are really under strain due to climate change. So, and we are using the the community-based approach, and this is what we are investigating. And for this program, we're traveling a lot through Europe and look at other solutions and bring ideas and inspiration back to Ireland. And I hand you back over to Mark.
Thank you, Constanza. So yeah, I think that hopefully explains why the Rivers Trust has an interest in peatlands. They're an integral part of the hydrological environment. And I think it's worth saying that you can't manage rivers without managing the landscape around them. So, you know, our water management is very much about land management, and very often land management is about people management. And also cattle management, which is what I'll touch on now. So Constanza has obviously covered off issues around water quantity and also climate. But we're also seeing a water quality crisis here on the island of Ireland, and this has become nowhere more acute than in the Lough Neagh Basin, which straddles the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. So I'm going to take us north now to Northern Ireland for this next bit of the presentation. So it's fair to say that Northern Ireland has a nutrient problem, but I would say Ireland has a nutrient problem, the whole island of Ireland. But if we look at Northern Ireland under the microscope, 75% of all the land in Northern Ireland is used for agriculture. And almost all of that is grassland. And that grassland is intensified grassland. So it receives slurry, it receives fertilizer. They're not mixed species rich swards. They're very much ryegrass fields. In fact, someone once described them to me as a green desert. And I actually think that's quite an interesting description. And because so much land is turned over to agriculture, or maybe as it's been turned over because of this, Northern Ireland actually produces 5 times more food than its population requires. So we're not producing food for home consumption or even for consumption for the island of Ireland. but we're feeding the UK, we're feeding parts of Europe, and that intensive agriculture puts a huge amount of pressure on the land and on the water. And again, as someone said to me recently, the problem is we export the food, but we don't export the waste. So all the waste stays here, and that's a problem. And so the main source of nutrient loss to waterways, be they rivers or lakes, is agriculture. And in Northern Ireland, phosphate is more of an issue than nitrate. And this is mostly down to our very wet soils, very wet, peaty soils. And so phosphate binds to those soil particles, and the soil gets lost from the land because of erosion, because of overgrazing, and that soil carries the phosphate into our watercourses. And our scientists in Northern Ireland look at what's known as the phosphate balancing budget. And they've calculated that we have a phosphorus surplus in Northern Ireland, but that has actually increased. So after seeing a dip in phosphate levels, and you can see this on the graph to the right of the screen, around 2008 there was a drop in the phosphorus budget in Northern Ireland, and particularly phosphorus in rivers. And this was largely due to the Nitrates Action Programme that came in through EU directives. But then steadily that has started to increase again. So from 2008 to 2017, it increased from 13 to nearly 17 kilograms of phosphorus per hectare. And most of this is coming in imported feeds for cattle. So although we have tried to reduce phosphate being applied to fields in an inorganic form, in its rock form, powdered form, there is now more phosphate in food that's being fed to animals, and that's then being excreted out onto the land. And so the result of that is that when it washes off into our rivers, we have increased phosphate levels, and 39% of our rivers in Northern Ireland have phosphate levels above what would be considered good water quality status. And that corresponds with the soils. So if you sample the soils, and that is going on at the minute in Northern Ireland, 38% of the soil that's analysed, or the fields that are analysed, has more phosphate in it than is required for the grass to grow. And yet people do still apply more phosphate without having done soil to determine whether they need it in the first place. And when you add all that together with the fact that 57% of our soil is classed at high risk of being eroded and washed off into rivers, you can begin to understand why so much phosphate gets from the land into the water. Okay, Constanza? So this has really come to the fore now with Lough Neagh. For decades, we and others have been saying that there is too much phosphorus in the water, that this is having a detrimental impact on the water environment. All the data has shown that. But last summer, a perfect storm occurred. We had a very dry spring, and then we had a relatively wet summer, and it was actually quite warm, unusually for Northern Ireland. And this all culminated in the perfect conditions for blue-green algae, or cyanobacteria. It's not actually an algae, it's bacteria, to form in Lough Neagh. And the reason this is significant is because of what Lough Neagh is. It's the largest freshwater lake in these islands. It has a surface area of nearly 400 square kilometres. And just to put that into context, Lough Neagh is slightly larger than the island of Malta. So if anybody has been to Malta, you then realise how big Lough Neagh actually is. And its catchment area is enormous. It's over 4,500 square kilometres, most of which is in Northern Ireland, but some of which is in Ireland. And it supplies almost half of Northern Ireland's drinking water to 750,000 people. And what we have seen is that around Lough Neagh, 62% of the phosphates getting into the loch are coming from agriculture. there's 24% that's coming from wastewater treatment plants that are not working properly, and there's 12% that's coming from septic tanks. And when you combine that with the increasing temperatures in the loch, and the water is now 1 degree warmer on average every year than it was 30 years ago, along with the invasive species that have moved into the loch that change the quality of the water column, this has created the perfect scenarios for the blue-green algae to bloom. And the graph at the bottom, I appreciate, is incredibly small, but the first large blue column is the number of water bodies in Northern Ireland overall that are impacted by agricultural pollution. And you can see it significantly outweighs all the other pressures that are on water bodies around Northern Ireland. So this has resulted in the government having to come forward with a plan specifically for Lough Neagh, and it was published just at the end of last week. And this plan now sets out what action is going to need to be taken in order to reduce this impact and reverse what's happened in Lough Neagh. But I think it's worth saying that the issue is so severe in the loch that all the estimates suggest that if no more phosphate went into Lough Neagh today, it would take 40 years for the loch to recover. So it's took decades to get into this situation, and it's going to take decades to get out of it again. There is a glimmer of hope, of course, because we can change land management practices, and we can start to make that change today. But better than that, the Rivers Trust, in partnership with the government in Northern Ireland, started that process about 4 years ago. So I'm going to explain now what we've been doing. We set up something called the Agricultural Catchment Programme, and the purpose is to address the agricultural inputs of phosphates and nitrates and sediment to watercourses. But we do this in a non-regulatory way. So the Rivers Trust is non-government. Farmers are very often aware that there are problems around their farm, but they don't know who to talk to. They're frightened to ask for help because they think they'll get themselves into trouble. So what we're offering is non-regulatory, confidential farm advice. And we also then pair that with a grant program that we've developed to bring about changes on the farm. So the Farmer Group Facilitation Project is about bringing farmers together, allowing them to learn from each other, and to walk the farms with the landowners and identify all the things that could be done to help protect and improve water quality and quantity. And every farm is left with a very bespoke and confidential water environment management plan for their farm. There's a list of actions in it, a list of measures or behavioural changes that landowners can make. And we then offer them access to what we call the Sustainable Catchments Programme, which is essentially an agri-environmental scheme that we have developed, which has hundreds of measures in it that farmers can undertake and receive grant aid for to make those changes on their farms. And we've also now paired that up with another strand of funding and advice called Woodlands for Water, where we have a dedicated woodlands officer who will go onto the farm and look at where we can integrate trees into the farm business. And those trees don't just help protect water quality and the environment and sequester carbon, but they also enhance the sustainability of the farm business itself. So when we bring all of these three strands together, we're aiming to develop sustainable and water-friendly farm businesses across Northern Ireland. And we're focusing our attention on 5 key areas at the moment. The Ballinderry, Dundrum, the Owen Calloo, the Salterstown and the Upper Bann, which are all shown in those coloured catchments on the map. And so you can see they're spread out right across Northern Ireland. And we have 7 full-time farm advisors and a support team that's working with them, all funded by the department. And they're producing those farm plans and encouraging that peer-to-peer network learning and support. And then the grant programme is administered by us to the farming community. So it's very hands-on, it's very one-to-one and bespoke, but importantly, it's confidential between us and the landowner. And the plans that are produced for each farm ensure that the right measures go in the right places in order to bring about the water quality benefit that we want to see. So far, we have over 350 landowners and 300 farm plans produced, and there are more farms waiting for their plans to be produced now. And since 2021, we've been able to invest 2.75 million sterling in interventions on farms to protect water quality. And that's a whole range of things. So it's fencing and creating buffer zones of trees and grasses to stop sediment and phosphate getting to watercourses. We provide alternative drinking water sources for animals that have been excluded from rivers. These can be mains fed drinkers, cattle operated pasture pumps, solar powered drinking troughs. But we also do clean and dirty water separation projects, making sure that clean water is captured in the yard and clean water is sent to nearby watercourses and kept clean, and dirty water is captured and managed the way it should be. And we can reduce the pressure on the farm infrastructure by building, for example, roofs over middens and silage clamps so that we're not producing as much dirty water on farms in the first place. The partnership with the Woodland Trust in Northern Ireland is allowing us to plant trees anywhere we can, and we have a target of 100,000 trees per year across the catchments that we're working in. And simultaneous to this, the Ballinderry Rivers Trust and the River Blackwater Catchment Trust are looking at developing and trialling results-based payments with farmers. So this could actually take this program to another level, something which we haven't yet done. And it's worth saying that the Minister Moore's Department of Agriculture and Environment has been supporting this program and wants to continue supporting it, but it's now actually been outlined in the Lough Neagh Management Plan that the Sustainable Catchment Program needs to be scaled up significantly. So we're looking now at what other catchments we can look in right across Northern Ireland, but particularly in the Lough Neagh Basin. Okay, so I think that is pretty much it. Just a summary of what Constanza and I have covered. So just to remind you that the Rivers Trust is a charity. It operates on an all-island basis. We are empowering communities and landowners and anybody who has a role to play in protecting water. We're empowering them with the skills and knowledge they need to make informed decisions and also to contribute to real actions on the ground that make a difference. And citizen science itself is a very powerful tool to both engage people, but also build that knowledge base to help us to tackle these problems effectively. I hope you got from what Constanza said that peatland restoration brings about multiple benefits, and whilst the focus of Buffer Plus is around water and carbon, there are many other benefits that come from peatland restoration for biodiversity, for economy, and so on. And it's only if we work together we're going to unlock the potential on this, because most peatland in Ireland is in private ownership, it's not in state ownership. So we need to find ways to engage landowners and incentivize landowners to change practice towards sustainable peatland management, but recognizing that those people still have to make a living from the land. So we're looking for the win-win solutions to peatland restoration. And likewise with the advice and support to farmers, we're not asking farmers to stop farming, we're just asking them to farm in a more water-friendly way. And very often what we're asking them to do is way above and beyond what would be required by regulation. And so by using grant programs in targeted ways, we can install many of the built solutions or nature-based solutions that will bring about the change required. So on that note, and given that we are community-led at our heart, I'll end with this quote from Margaret Mead, which is, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you both very much. Oh, getting some feedback there. So I suppose thank you very, very much for that interesting talk. I didn't know so many of the peatlands were privately owned. That's news to me. Not very happy news, I suppose. But so we've gone up till about 8:30. So if we're going to take a more short question time than usual, we'll have about 15 minutes for questions. So if anybody has any questions, I'll stop recording now. Please drop them into the chat rather than turning on the microphone, because things get very hairy when everyone's trying to talk at once. So if you want to type out your questions, we've got about 15 minutes. And thank you both very much again for your for talking to us today.
Thank you.